Ladies and gentlemen, in any sport that you follow, it's always a treat to watch the best athletes or the best teams go at each other. For example, in La Liga in España, it's always a treat to watch Real Madrid and Barcelona battle it out. In tennis, any matchup between Federer, Nadal, Djokovic, or whoever might be your favorite player is something that a lot of fans look forward to. In chess, it's Magnus versus Hikaru. It's generally our version of El Clásico. There's just one problem. Magnus and Hikaru play each other too much. They play each other so often every single week online that they get bored, and sometimes they prefer not to play a serious game, but rather make an absolute mockery of this beautiful board game we hold dear in our heart, a board game so closely associated with a form of intelligence, a form of sophistication. Well, today, I'll be showing you a game where that gets thrown out the window. You see, Magnus and Hikaru recently got paired in a tournament against each other, and this was the opening. Pawn to f3, pawn to f6, pawn to e4, pawn to e5, pawn to f4. So, Magnus opens with f3. This is known as the Barnes opening, because I guess you are an animal who belongs in a barn if you play f3. Now, if white then continued king to f2, I think technically this is the original form of the Bon Cloud. The real Bon Cloud now, for some reason, is this, e3, followed by king to e2. This is the Bon Cloud opening. But f3, f6, and Magnus decides, I'm not going to play the Bon Cloud against Hikaru, and Hikaru obviously, he matches his opponent's nonsense, because getting an opponent who plays f3, and then if you play a regular opening and then they beat you is very embarrassing. So he mimics his opponent all the way here, and now Magnus has several moves that he can play, but he opts for f4. Now, the most ridiculous thing about this is that now it's a king's gambit. It's a king's gambit. It's like they played e4, e5, f4, except black played f6 and now gets to make a second move. So we have this, black played f6 declining the king's gambit, and now black gets to play a second move. The other ridiculous thing about this is that white is still better despite this being the opening. So Magnus and Hikaru play each other so often that they have to just play ridiculous openings sometimes because they want to have fun. They don't want to play serious chess all the time. Well, let's see what happens when they basically play complete nonsense. Total memery in the early phase of the game. Hikaru plays the best move in this position, which is actually the move d5. In general, a flank attack is best met with a strike down the center. And even though black is going to have to bring the queen out if white takes, it's not a bad move because next you can bring out your bishop, you can bring out your knight, you can castle. And the best thing for white to do here is to make easy developing moves that also create threats. There is nothing wrong with the move knight c3. You want to move the knight into the center of the board anyway, and black needs to move the queen. Black will decide where he is going to move the queen. You generally don't want to go all the way back. That doesn't really help you progress in your development. So Hikaru goes here, which is one of the better moves, lining up an attack against Magnus's king. Magnus doesn't want to play knight f3 and give up a pawn with a check, so he takes the pawn on e5. And now it would be, it looks good for black to play queen takes e5 because it's a check. But the problem with that is after white simply blocks the check, white will develop another piece with an attack on the queen and get a very big lead in development, which is why the better move is to actually take with the pawn. Now the queen hides behind the pawn. The queen is not going to be attacked by the knight or the bishop. Black will go knight f6, knight c6, and obviously do what every, good beginner chess player is taught to do, develop the pieces and castle the king, right? No, definitely not right. I have a bit of a cold. I'm a little sick, so I'm trying to get as many fluids inside of me as possible. Knight f3, knight f6, and now Magnus gives a check. Magnus gives this check because he needs to develop quickly. He doesn't really have time to put his bishop on c4 because it'll get taken, but bishop e5 is an interesting move because normally this check is bad. But, normally it's bad because black can simply block. And I don't recommend you give checks that can be blocked by pawns where you will just lose time. But actually the benefit of this is that it's not easy for Hikaru to develop. If Hikaru plays bishop c5, you know, Magnus will put his bishop on this diagonal and make it very difficult for black to castle. So actually, this little wraparound maneuver is very, very clever. And Hikaru is several moves away from finishing the development over here. So he plays the best move. And I love this kind of moment of high-level understanding. Like, you know, both these guys, they played a nonsense opening. There's no opening theory, because obviously they didn't. I mean, I would really hope Hikaru and Magnus are not sitting in a deep, dark room somewhere, you know, grinding the opening theory of this garbage, because then they are like serious nerds with no lives, right? But instead, Hikaru plays e4. He understands the moment is now to strike and mess up the coordination of the white pieces, all right? What that means is, you know, this knight is going to have to move somewhere. Magnus has been a long-time subscriber of the GothamChess YouTube channel, so he's familiar with my concept of danger levels. He doesn't have to move his knight if he can create a threat of equal or exceeding danger, which is why he moves his bishop to b3. It's certainly an improvement of the bishop. The only time you need to be careful making moves like this is if the queen could move now and create another threat combined with the threat on the knight, and you would be in serious trouble. That doesn't really exist in this position, so we have the queen going to f5, and now Magnus develops another piece, so he has a lead of 4-2, pinning the pawn to the king, so the knight cannot be taken. Hikaru plays the very natural bishop to e7. Everything looks good, except Hikaru cannot castle, which is actually a big problem. It's a very, very big problem. And now we have knight h4 attacking the queen. Black has several options here, but keeping in mind that his king is going to be stuck in the center for at least several more moves, it's probably a good idea to trade the queens. Good rule of thumb. Now, what I don't understand here is Hikaru went down to 15 seconds on the next move? Hikaru spent 1 minute and 28 seconds here? Did he lag? Like, I don't... Was he just that panicked? I don't quite get it. Maybe he thought he was under severe pressure or something. I don't really know, to be totally honest. Maybe he was spoiled for choice. Maybe he thought he had queen g5, queen f4. Like, queen g5 definitely looks like a good move. And then maybe you get some sort of development like this, and knight e4, queen e4. But actually, I think black it doesn't have enough here. So I don't know what happens here, but Hikaru ends up playing queen g4 and only has 15 seconds on the clock after 12 moves. He gets 3 minutes for the entire game with a little bit of a bonus time. He plays queen g4, and the instructive thing there is that if you are afraid that your king is going to get attacked, it is a good idea to trade the opponent's most powerful piece. So he plays queen g4, takes, knight takes g4. Not bishop takes g4, knight takes g4, attacking this knight. Magnus plays g3. Now, you ask me what the best move here for black is, I'm going to 1,000,000% say take the knight. I have no patience. Take the knight, damage my opponent's pawn structure, doubled h pawns on the outskirts of the board, right? That's what I'm going to say. But Hikaru here plays a very interesting move. He also could, of course, just come back, defending his center pawn. Hikaru gives away his e-pawn. Just says, take it. Because if you take it, your bishop is going to struggle to develop. It's going to be stuck. You're going to have this big target in the center for my bishop. I might have open rooks and, you know, down the center line. E3 is a crazy move. And if I were to play h3 in this position, black would just play knight f2, like leaving this pawn here and try to grab the pawn on h3. It's like a really deep move. Magnus plays d3 because he's like, well, I'm going to win this pawn. I'm just not going to damage my pawn structure. So clearly respecting Hikaru's pawn sacrifice, although even the better move there might have been to castle, right? And then his rook would have been very powerful and the pawn just stays here. Castle's a very tough move to play. You kind of inherently feel like you need to address your opponent's move pawn to e3. And now Hikaru plays rook f8. I just find it so fascinating that Magnus has 1 minute and 7 seconds here and Hikaru has 5 seconds. He has 5 seconds on the clock. How is that possible? This dude's got 5 seconds on the clock. Do you know what I would do with 5 seconds on the clock? Poop my pants. Like, how do you even have the nervous system to make good moves with 5 seconds on the clock? How do you even react to things? Pawn to h3. Hikaru also has all of Magnus's pieces pushed up against the last rank. These pieces can't do anything. This knight is completely standing on the edge of the board. It looks like it's black who is calling the shots. The rook is hanging. The pawn is going to fall. This pawn's the last defender of this position. Not to mention I can play g5 anytime I want, which will shove the knight backwards. Rook h2. Bishop d6. Look at this, dude. How is Hikaru doing? He has less than 5 seconds on the clock. Let me say this right now. Let me be very, very clear. There was only one man on planet Earth, maybe even all the other planets. Well, I don't know what type of aliens there are out there that play chess. There's only one man I would trust to play Magnus Carlsen with 5 seconds on the clock, and it's Hikaru. It's not Fabiano, it's not Gukesh, it's not Prague, it's not Nepomniachtchi, it's not anybody. It's not anybody else. Only Hikaru, 3.8 seconds on the clock. How does he do this? This is the best move. Knight back to e2, but Magnus isn't just going to go down. The position's equal. Hikaru grabs the pawn on h3. How does he even... That looks like it loses. That looks like it loses because after this, the knight is hanging. And the bishop's hanging. Nope. Knight g4 just in time. Rook takes, knight takes. Position is equal. But now I would be worried that Magnus is going to get over here. Magnus brings the king to the middle. Blunders knight f1 check. Knight f1 check, dude. Check along the back rank. And now Hikaru comes back. He threatens a draw. He threatens a draw. Magnus says no draw. Hikaru probably would have been fine with the draw there. The engine actually really likes black's position. Thinks it's time to start, you know, instigating. But, okay, Hikaru repeats. Magnus says no, no draw. You can't put your knight on the back rank. We're going to do this again. And now we are about to have a time scramble. So both guys low on the clock. And let me tell you, someone's nervous system is going to have to give out. They just don't have a lot of time. Knight d7. By the way, kind of sneaky. Black can castle. Black only moved the rook. So black can actually castle, right? We're going to repeat. Knight d7, king back to d2, knight g4, knight d4. Hikaru gives a check. Hikaru castles. This is ridiculous. Hikaru's just straight up beating Magnus. He had 15 seconds on the clock after he played the move queen g4. And now he castles on the 26th move of the game. He has Magnus's king stuck on the back rank. Magnus is probably going to lose the pawn on g3. And these pawns are going to move forward. This knight's going to move in. This rook is going to move in. Hikaru will go here, chop down the bishop, remove the defense. How is Hikaru beating Magnus Carlsen with 10 seconds on the clock? 5, 3. Knight here, bishop e5. Targets the knight, defends the pawn. Sorry, targets the knight, defends the pawn, targets this pawn. c5 wins a piece because the knight can't guard the knight. g6 wins a piece. You can't move one knight, you can't move the other knight. You move that knight, you lose that knight. You move that knight, you lose that knight. Check. King b8. Knight e6 attacks the rook. Rook goes here. Hikaru's playing with 5 pieces. Magnus is playing with 4. And on top of that, the king is extremely poorly placed because if that rook leaves, rook f1 is game over. d4, Magnus going for counterplay. If you take the knight, there is this. By the way, you can probably take the knight. Hikaru doesn't. He grabs a free pawn. The knight for Magnus is still hanging. And not only is it hanging, it's trapped. Magnus plays rook takes h7. It's the best that he can do. Hikaru can take on e7. Or he can win the rook, which I talked about. And that's exactly what he does. Rook takes g7. And now you just have to not panic. You can give a check. And you can bring the knight back to f6. And now, Hikaru has 5 seconds, which he's had since he played the move e3, basically. Rook f8. And it is Magnus who is down to 1 second on the clock. Rook f1. Magnus down to 1 second. Plays knight f5. Hikaru brings the bishop back to b4, covering the white knight jumps. Knight to f8, and he's clearing out the defense. Knight takes. And Magnus Carlsen ran out of time here. 2 seconds down. Didn't have enough time to even resign. And Hikaru beat Magnus. 33-22, the rating of Hikaru. How did Hikaru... From this, Hikaru played 22 moves with 5 seconds on the clock. He had 5 seconds on the 15th move of the game. His time never went above 6 seconds. Look at Hikaru's time. Remember, he gets bonus time every move. He gains a second. Hikaru beat Magnus Carlsen. 2 seconds was the lowest Hikaru's time went. Hikaru beat Magnus Carlsen with 5 seconds on the clock. Like, if this dude is not clearly the best speed player in the, especially Bullet, I don't even know what's, like, any given day, this man is very easily the best Bullet player in the world. Like, Magnus is, that is the closest time control that is up for dispute between Magnus and any other player. Magnus, obviously the best player in Classical, Rapid, and Blitz. But, yeah, these boys put on, as usual, some good memes, and I don't know how Hikaru managed to pull it off. That's all I wanted to share with you today. Yeah, what can I say? Nuts. Get out of here.